Welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, October 18th, 2025, and earlier on this week, we talked about the United States Supreme Court seemingly poised to weakening the Voting Rights Act, an implementation that Section 2 mandates on the congressional level from the VRA that gives Democrats additional seats in the Deep South, ensuring minority representation in Washington, D.C., as Republicans look to find any avenue to redraw their congressional boundaries ahead of the 2026 midterms to benefit Donald Trump and his administration. The United States Supreme Court making these arguments where it seems as if the conservative justices are in cahoots with maybe not cahoots, but in alignment with Donald Trump and Louisiana Attorney General's office that is looking to overturn Section 2 of the VRA could have significant and tremendous electoral ramifications that could ultimately lopside the voting patterns for decades to come in the United States House of Representatives. What we know is that in the last House election, Democrats won about 215 seats, and Republicans won about 220. In 2026, it is the Democrats who are looking to flip 5 seats plus more and build out their expansive House majority if they do end up doing as well as the data might suggest. And where it stands right now is that Democrats would be predicted to win the generic ballot by 1.6%. In the last cycle, it was Republicans who won the generic ballot by 2.6%. So it stands to reason that if that shift is correct, you would shift the national stage by roughly 4.2% to get to Democrats being at a 1.6% victory across the country. And so this is where we're at. It brings the Democrats to 229 seats across the board here. Republicans are at 209. It's not a great place for Democrats relative to 2018, but you do have to keep in mind that at the end of the day, this is still a substantive enough majority that Democrats would be okay with where it stands at this point. And after all, that is just a 1.6% victory on the national stage, assuming that the map universally shifts from 2024. And obviously, that's not a perfect science, but it gives you a general idea of what you could expect. But if the Voting Rights Act is in fact overturned, and as Republicans already, before that is even in consideration, are gaining an additional seat in Missouri, North Carolina, Indiana, and potentially 5 in Texas. Let's say Proposition 50 ends up passing. I'll give Democrats the benefit of the doubt on that one, but assuming that it doesn't, Republicans would actually be in a much better position, but that brings Democrats down to about 226 seats, barring a change in a state like Kansas, in a state like Nebraska, 226 seats. If Democrats end up, for instance, losing, and Ohio's set to gain 2, so you'd bring the Democrats down to 224. Let's say that Texas ends up getting its way, reduce an additional 5, Democrats are at 219. But let's say, for instance, Proposition 50 passes and Republicans are at, whatever number it is, Democrats are at 224 based off redistricting. If the VRA goes, so do an additional 12 seats on the national stage. So if you watched my video about the VRA, you might be thinking, okay, Ethan, this is a repetitive and redundant place to be when it comes down to talking about this. Why are we rehashing this? Well, I'll tell you. This video is actually not just about it, and you can tell from the title of this. I forget that you can read that before we actually get into it. But the point is, all this context is important because if the VRA goes, there are avenues for Democrats to respond. Now, I will say this, and I'm sure any Democrat watching this video knows it at your core, even if you don't want to admit it that it's true. The political party of the left has far too often found itself in excessive moments of opportunity to squander said moments out of fear of what it might suggest that Democrats would stoop to the level of Republicans who are brazenly and blatantly across this country changing district to district to district to district, changing Ohio, North Carolina, Indiana, Missouri, Texas. If it was exhausting to hear that list, imagine how the voters in that state must feel. But after all, they're going to act the way they want to act. But it is Democrats that, if the VRA goes, actually do, based off the supermajorities they hold in certain state legislatures, the agency they have, if they are truly about it, they would be willing to go all in on some of these states. And we're going to explore some of the very fascinating options the Democrats might have to retaliate against Republicans. The first one that comes to mind is the state of Illinois, an already gerrymandered map that gives Democrats the upper hand 14-3 every single cycle. And thinking about what it means for 2026 is that, let's say the VRA goes. Democrats have the governorship, a supermajority in both of the state legislative chambers. They have the ability to draw a map that they like. And chances are they absolutely would. Without the VRA, you can find yourself in a position where in the state of Illinois, you can draw a much more aggressive map in the state. You would no longer have to subjugate the state of Illinois to the same boundaries in terms of ensuring minority representation, which is why you have such deep blue districts in Chicago that, are built out either to be majority Hispanic districts, majority black districts, to ensure representation, for XYZ reasons. But in Illinois, for the Section 2, that is the reason. But if it is, the Supreme Court says it's not a provision that can be maintained, Illinois could draw out an additional 3 seats from the GOP. It's already an excessive gerrymander, but this would make it absolute. But an even bigger state that comes to mind is Proposition 50 state, the state of California, that currently has 9 Republicans. If the VRA goes, you could draw a map here that would remove the 7 Hispanic majority seats that are currently maintained by the VRA. If Democrats were to try this map, Republicans could sue. But now, without the VRA, they can't. And the map could look like this. Every single seat here would be Kamala Harris plus 11, if not more. Republicans would go from 9 seats in California, when back in 2020 they had 11, and in 2016 they had 14. But in 2024 they have 9, and after that, if that map was to be implemented, they would have 0. Republicans would gain 12 seats in the Deep South. Illinois and California could provide them 12 seats across the 2 states. Obviously, no guarantee that Newsom or whoever gets, put into office after Newsom, assuming that this is something that is a decision made in the summer of 2026 and there's not enough time to make an immediate change in any of the states in reaction to it until 2028. But Democrats would have the ability, if they could get through yet again another Proposition 50 style vote. But maybe that vote would ultimately return the power to the legislature depending on how much this proposition passes, because if Democrats win this vote by 25, they could win the next one by 10, and it would still take into effect. And in the state of Illinois, they wouldn't need to do anything with the citizens in the state, because Democrats have the ability to draw this map differently. Illinois, California, there are ways to draw these maps. And thinking about what we could see, too, in response to the VRA, that can make it so, as Republicans would draw out every Democratic seat in Tennessee, South Carolina, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and as many as they can in North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. If Democrats were to take, back control of the same seats and states that they held before, they could see a repealing in some of these other states of independent commissions, like Colorado, that in 2024 gave Republicans about 4 seats across the state. 4 seats across the state, in a state that hasn't voted for Republicans since 2004. Democrats could take advantage and expand in some of the states that they have. They could repeal the independent commission, or what the judge has declared too, in New York, making it from 19-7 to 22-4, 23-3, 24-2. Virginia, which has an independent commission, could go from 6-5 to 10-1, depending on how expansive Democrats get in their majority in 2025. The point is, there are methods of retaliation that do exist. There's a lot of hurdles to jump through, but if Democrats are in fact faced up against the very real reality that without an adequate response, Republicans would dominate and have full House control for decades to come, the response needs to happen. It must meet the moment, and as much as, again, I am not super confident Democrats will be that party that constantly meets the moment, knowing, and a lot of Dem voters know this too, where they have squandered a multitude of opportunities before. It would be moments like this where they would really need to pull through. Would they? Not entirely sure. But the avenues do exist. If and only if the Supreme Court rules in the way legal scholars who analyze these hearings, these conversations, seem to think it's going to go. But in the event it doesn't, maybe not. But as it stands right now, Democrats are certainly not entirely powerless. The only question is, will they act with said power and break precedent of keeping their hands tied behind their backs in fight after fight on the redistricting standpoint with the Republican Party, or will they finally stand up for their party and go for the way that Republicans are across the board, ensuring additional Democratic representation if Republicans try to pull the same games they've been pulling for the past few years here in 2026 and beyond, but only time will tell. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the top left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 House election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.